So I'm gonna be straight up with you guys on something. This episode is just gonna be me talking about guy shit in a very guy-like way. But the weird thing is, every single thing that I'm going to talk about is going to involve something that affects the babes as well. You get me? So it's about to be a pretty interesting episode. So let me start things off from a very funny point of view. Now, there's a man who has been avoiding sex with women after realizing that he develops flu-like symptoms whenever he's having an orgasm. Now, let's just think about that again. So there's a dude out in this world who will be going ahead giving it his best when he's hitting a babe from the back or whichever place. And then at some point when he feels like stuff is getting good, his nose blocks. Damn. It sounds very hard to fathom, but at the same time, it doesn't sound like it's all that bad. Like, I feel like it sounds worse than it actually is because I'm thinking about it. When dude is pretty much having his nose blocked and he's about to nut, it's pretty much like me. After I've gone ahead, I've put all the work in, and when I am tired and I can barely breathe, that is when shorty is like, I'm about to finish, don't stop. Like, isn't that roughly the same problem though?
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
Okay, maybe I overstated the size of the problem. Now, of course, he says flu-like symptoms, but I don't think it was very particular what kind of flu-like symptoms, because it's probably a hell of a lot worse. So let me just read the story real quick. Now, the 27-year-old man, identified as Mr. A, avoided having sex with women due to the flu-like symptoms he developed. In a report by Urology Case Reports, the young man would experience fever, coughing, sneezing, muscle aches, and concentration issues. His ailment is known as post-orgasmic illness syndrome, a form of sexual dysfunction in men. Now, Dr. Andrew Shanholzer of Oakland University said in the report that the illness is often misdiagnosed, leading several men to suffer. Currently, there are 60 cases of POIS, and its exact cause is unknown. End quote. Now, you kind of think about it, okay, maybe what I said was a little bit of an understatement. Because you think about it, like, the worst thing that you can do when you're about to nut is to start coughing. Like, I'd have thought of it as like, you know what, maybe it's a sneeze. And sneezes kind of feel nice when you actually get to release it. And you know, like if you were to sneeze and nut at the same time, I'm betting that the feeling would probably be magical. It's just that when you're busy coughing and you're about to nut, I feel like it's very annoying. And I'm saying this as someone who sort of tried to do it when I had a cold and there was a bad cough. And I didn't even get that much coughing. But it was just so annoying trying to do it because your concentration is actively being pulled to stuff that you wouldn't normally think about. Like, you know, whether your nose is fully blocked or the fact that you want to cough or the fact that your throat is like itchy and shit. Or whether it is if you're still having a cold, if you feel hot at that point in time. Although I do have to admit that last one is mostly a me thing. But all in all, your concentration does actually get wrecked. So all in all, I do feel sorry for this guy, not just because of the fact that he can't do it with babes, but just the fact that because it's an orgasm and not necessarily a women thing, I feel like this guy might be going through the same exact issue when he beats his meat. So honestly, it is very sad that there's people that are going through that. The 60 people that are going through that, I feel sorry for you. And honestly, I hope that you get some sort of solace. If not through pleasure by orgasm, then probably it can be pleasure through podcasting, of which I like to specialize in pleasure a little bit. So I might as well start this podcast in my very interesting fashion, where I start by saying, welcome to Break Time on Westside, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who's now starting to value his orgasms a hell of a lot more. And as such, I don't take nothing for granted because it is such a special feeling. He's a man who recently included running his mouth on his new cardio workout. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Battle of the Sexes, our weekly love, sex, and relationships show where I get to talk about relationships and I get to talk about the stuff around it. Some people feel that it's good. Some people take a feeling to it, but all in all, I usually like to come through with that conclusion. Now, if you agree with it, if you don't agree with it, if you'd like it, if you just want to say hi or suggest a topic we should discuss, then the place to hit me up at is at Breaktime on Westside on IG and on Facebook. The DMs are always open. On Twitter, you can slide into at Bagak the D. That is my personal Twitter handle. The DMs are also open there. And if you feel like you like the podcast, then a nice rating and or review on whichever app that you're using would be highly appreciated as well. Now, a massive thank you to each and every one of you that have been submitting your feedback, that have been submitting your reviews, that posted up on stories. And Shera, mad shout out to you because, you've been giving love on your stories and I appreciate that. Now, we definitely have quite a bit to talk about on this episode, and I will try to not waste as much time as possible. But before I get into the main topic, I want to talk about this whole equality thing. And more so besides equality, the fact that it's just so subjective. Because people like to talk about equality so much up until it comes to paying bills or being accountable. Then all of a sudden, it's like one gender is supposed to take most of that shit. And most times it's supposed to be guys. And I find that to be particularly interesting. Now, I'm gonna play a clip for you that actually had both of these topics being mentioned. And it was a man who was responding to the question of who pays on the first date, the man or the woman. So let me just play the clip for you, then we can get into it for a little bit. So here it is.
Who pays on a first date, the man or the woman?
It's a complex. This whole equality thing, I'm a champion for it, but I also believe in being natural, and as a man, I want to show a woman that I appreciate her even coming to this. There's a lot of dangerous men out there. So that in itself, that a woman goes to gym with you and trusts you that much, I feel like, she's the one in the weak position because you're stronger physically than her. So I feel like guys out there, don't be quick to ask them to pay. Like, you should pay because she's out there and she's giving you that trust to show up, to see what you're talking about.
Even if the date doesn't go well?
Even if the date doesn't go, it doesn't matter, man. She's there with you. You should pay for her meal. And maybe the next time, maybe she takes you out.
Okay, first of all, there's just a way that this guy said everything. Oh, I'm a champion for equality, but I also believe in being natural. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, what the fuck's natural about a guy paying a bill? It's not like money existed, in prehistoric times. It's not like dinosaurs would buy food at the market and shit. I think the word that he probably wanted to use was traditional, but I guess, I like to make fun of shit. But anyways, that said, I know that this topic feels very washed out. Like, it feels like a very overused topic. The past, I think, 2.5, if not 3 years, have pretty much been filled with people asking this question, and I will admit, I feel like I have responded to this question more times than I think should be humanly possible, just because too many people ask about it and there's so many differing opinions on it, to the point at which people on the internet were like, you know what, just go and be with whoever it is that you want to be. If it's someone who is willing to pay for the entire date and it's a guy, then fine, cool. If it's a babe who's willing to pay for her entire bit, then it's cool. If you guys are going fully Dutch, regardless of who ordered what, then it's cool. If one person isn't going to pay for shit, then it's cool. Just go and get someone. The only thing is, by the time people were getting to that particular point, people had moved it from the date to paying for bills in relationships. And at that point in time, it made sense because you can have that discussion with your partner at the time. The problem is, when you're going out on a date, it's not like you guys will talk beforehand and be like, all right, we're going on a date and I'll pay this amount or I intend on doing this amount. People don't discuss money before they go out on a date. So you kind of think about it. It's one of those things that people get to find out when the bill comes, not before you go on the date or even when you're on the date. It's usually something that comes right after. But I'll even leave that one aside. That was what I had wanted to talk about. But there's this whole thing that is brought up about, making her feel safe, so you should pay the bill. And honestly, my goodness, like, I hadn't even thought about it up until I just played this clip right now. But my goodness, it sounds very myopic. Because I'm stronger physically, I should pay. How the fuck does me being physically stronger affect my ability to pay a bill? Like, it makes absolutely fuck all sense when you're trying to explain it that way. Because when you kind of think about it, if I have more physical power and people are busy talking about food, like, that's not even an issue. if you were talking about power and the power dynamics, hell, her being able to pay for her own bill actually puts her in a better power dynamic. Trust me, most people would know when they're busy handling other people's bills, because much as your pocket might get a little bit skinnier, you actually do feel a little bit more powerful because you know that you're the one with the earning potential and shit. And the fact that you can do that, especially if it's effortless, does kind of boost your ego a little bit here and there. So the fact that I'm supposed to make her feel safe by paying a bill sounds like absolute garbage. If anything, she should be paying her own bill so that she doesn't feel like she has any obligations or any expectations, and the guy doesn't feel the same way as well. Because normally after the guy's been paying for the date, especially if it's been more than one date, the guy definitely wants to smash. If you say no, this guy might feel entitled to a certain degree. So you kind of think about it, it's probably smarter if the babe is paying for her own bill. The only thing is, people don't think about that in a very logical manner, and I've had this discussion a lot, so I'll go back to the original decision that I made on this entire thing. If you're going out on a date and it's a dude and it's a babe, then at the point in time when the bill comes, as a dude, you should be able to cover the entire thing. But as a babe, you should be willing to step up and provide a certain amount. You don't necessarily have to cover the entire thing or half, but just the fact that you've given the effort that you actually want to contribute matters a hell of a lot more than who it is that gets to pay. That's my thoughts on it. But then again, that one is always welcome to debate, so I will leave it at that and I will move it on. So on to our main topic of this episode. Now, there's a certain babe who over the weekend sort of blew up a little bit, and she's a babe from TikTok. She's called Christina Blake, and she was talking about something that women go through whenever it comes to being approached by guys that people don't usually talk about. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I listened to the clip and it made me start to miss the GOAT himself, Kevin Samuels, because he'd have responded to this very well. But you know what, since he's not around and it's me who's here, I'm gonna play the clip for you, then we can get into it. So here it is.
Ladies, can we start a thread? Because I want to talk about something that I haven't heard, and I just want to know if anyone else, any women are experiencing this. Quick backstory. Coming up, I always had low self-esteem. I never felt attractive. I didn't really have friends. I was pretty much a loner. And so as an adult, I still have some of those thoughts in my mind. And it could honestly affect how I present myself when I'm out. But with that said, I have a lot of gorgeous friends, okay? Everybody's pretty. Everybody's pretty. Can we talk about how we are not the woman that's like ever approached in the friend group? More specifically, how you internalize it, how you deal with it. You know, because it's hard for me to believe that I'm the pretty girl when I'm out and men don't approach me. I tell you guys all the time that, like, I get the most attention from guys on the internet, not out in public. I for the most part, I'm never approached, just to keep it a buck. Or I'm approached by super older guys, like 50 and up. Nobody in my age range. And I don't care how many times my friends tell me I'm pretty. People at church tell me I'm pretty. When it's all said and done and I'm in a room with them, I'm never seen. And it's kind of hard to deal with. And then you can't even really talk to your homegirls about it, because if you tell them, then they're going to be self-conscious about how they are in your presence, and you don't want to dim their light because you love them. But like, what do I have to do? Distance myself from pretty people? Like, that doesn't make sense. I don't know. How do y'all deal with it? Do you talk to your homegirls? Do you just internalize it? Do you talk to other people? Do you just ignore the feelings? Like, because that's my thing. When I'm by myself and I meditate or I look at myself in the mirror, I feel beautiful. And then I get around other pretty girls and I feel like the ugly duckling. And nobody can convince me that I'm attractive. That's why it's hard for me to receive compliments. That's why it's hard for me to trust that what people are saying they mean, because my life experience tells me otherwise. So how do you deal with it if you are dealing with it?
Alright, first of all, 50-year-old niggas is niggas too. I like how Shorty was like, oh, I don't get approached by men. Then she brings up the fact that there's some 50-year-old dudes that are approaching her. Like, they're men too. They're not any less men than some of us young dudes are. But anyways, we get the point. We get the exact kind of men that you want. And, I understand, shorties don't want to be approached by ugly dudes. They don't want to be approached by dudes that they find unattractive. They want to be approached by tall dudes and dudes with money. But in this babe's case, she just wants to be approached by dudes, period. And okay, now here's the thing. Before I get into the whole, this is what you do, this is what you should probably be working on, let me start by saying that I kind of understand where she's at. Because on one end, I've been the guy that has gotten little to no attention when my homies were getting all the babes or they were talking to a bunch of these women. Like, I've been in that position before many years back, so I know exactly what she's going through. Then on the other hand, I'm a guy and I talk about guy shit all the time, so I'd like to think that I know a thing or two about how a lot of the guys that are approaching her friends and not her are probably thinking. So I'd like to think I'm in a well-placed position to kind of explain exactly what she's going through and how to get past it. Now, before I get into any of that though, let me start by saying a couple of things. One, approaching women in a group is one of the hardest things for a guy to do, especially when he's alone. When it's one guy or two guys and there's like 5 babes and the guy wants to approach one, it is a lot of work. Because if you're 2 guys, if you're 3 guys, you're pretty much relying on your guys, your 1 or your 2 guys, to pretty much hold it down for you and be the wingman and sort of keep the other babes distracted. If you're alone, it's even worse because not only are you trying to impress one babe, but you're trying to prevent 4 other babes from cock blocking you. And that's usually the thought process that comes with it. So maybe you being approached in a group might actually not be the best setting for you. Now, on top of that, there's something that a lot of babes never like to admit, and guys know for a fact, that was best explained in, I think it was Hall Pass. That was the name of the movie. Whereby there's actually a hierarchy of beauty amongst a group of women. Just the same way with guys, there's a hierarchy of sorts. The guy that has more money, the guy who can pull babes. There's a hierarchy of beauty with women. Now, in Hall Pass, the way they showed it was a bunch of ugly babes and one sort of mid to substandard babe that was chilling with them who looked super hot up until they sort of isolated her from the bunch of her friends and they realized that she doesn't look all that good. Now, this actually works also in the reverse with babes. So if you're not the finest babe amongst your crew, then there's a very good chance that if you're not at least among the top 3 finest out of a group of 5, there's a pretty good chance that guys will approach the top 3 and leave you, if not the top 4 and pretty much leave you. So that is something that actually does affect babes quite a bit. But alright, now that I've said all of that, now I can get into it. So Shorty said that she gets approached by like super old dudes who are 50. So I'm assuming that she's not 40, neither is she 50. And since I couldn't really find her actual age, I'm just gonna go with a ballpark estimate of somewhere between 26 and 30. And because she was talking about dudes and she only mentioned ages, I'm not going to include the other stuff that can be used to disqualify, such as height and earning potential. She didn't mention any of that, so I won't. Now let's move it on. So considering that she's approximately the age of probably 26 to 30, I'm assuming that the guys that she's looking for are probably between 28 and 40. Okay, so what do most of those guys want? Now, I'll tell you for a fact that most guys, regardless of whether they are 16 or whether they are 52, they will probably be looking for more or less the same things in babes, of which it's normally looks, but I'll tell you it's a combination of looks and confidence. If you have one or the other, it can actually work to your favor, but it's usually ideal to have both. Alright, so let me start with confidence first because it's a lot easier to work with. Now, of course, people will refer to it as confidence, some people will refer to it as vibes, some people will say that you have a great personality, but being an enthusiastic and confident person is something that guys actually do like. It's not just something that babes will look for in guys, guys will also look for that in babes. So if you have the sort of body language that doesn't make you look confident, say for example you go to a club and you're hunched over staring at your phone, or you're seated in the cocoon section of all of your babes, which is more or less the middle, and you're not really moving around as much and you don't have open body language, there's a pretty good chance that guys won't approach you. One, because you seem a little bit hidden and pulled back, and on top of that, you don't particularly seem like a very confident person. So that might be something that you'd want to work on. Then on top of that, moving around a little bit helps you quite a bit, because you don't necessarily have to sit with an entire crew of babes. You can actually go to the bar on your own, go and order a drink. As you're waiting on the drink, you can pretty much give open body language and the guys will most likely approach you. Because at the end of the day, a lot of guys are going to approach babes whether they find them to be super attractive or just pretty good looking. Now, that said, let's move on to the looks part. Now, I actually did go through this babe's IG page. I watched a bunch of reels. I actually liked the content. She seems like a pretty lively, nice person. And for anyone that wants it, you can hit me up on DMs, but there's a pretty good chance that I'll put it in the description so you can go and check out for yourself. Now, I'm gonna say right off the bat, I'm not a fan of piercings, especially on the face, but even with 3 nose piercings, I actually find her to be very, very cute. Like, she's actually a pretty woman, and I'm not just saying this when she has makeup, but even when she doesn't. Like, that's not a very familiar thing to say nowadays, but it's actually a true thing about her. She's actually a pretty woman. Now, that's at face value, so it's pretty much just the face. So the face, I can give it a nice 6.5 to 7 there. But when it comes to the body, that's when stuff starts to fall apart. Now, I'm not saying that she has an ugly body or she's not good looking. She's been working out and I appreciate that. It's just that when it comes to bodies, it's actually a proportions game. Like, guys will say that they're attracted to one thing or another, but especially for guys who are into thick babes, which she is to a certain degree, it's actually a proportions game more than anything. Like, you don't have to have the biggest tits and the biggest ass and a flat belly. You can actually have a bit of a belly, not too much of tits, but a big ass, and you will look great. Like, even without looking at the tits, the ass, or how thick a babe is. Like, there's actually a statistical study on the best waist to hip ratio that actually makes a woman attractive. And the thing is, if you are beyond it, then you will be considered attractive. If you are below it, then you might not classify as attractive to most guys. Now, of course, that one's relative, but what I will tell you for a fact is, if your hips aren't coming out, if your booty isn't popping, and your stomach leads out further on than that, if your stomach looks bigger than your booty and more so comes off forward more than your tits, then you're going to be classified as unattractive to most guys, regardless of how pretty you are. And that's part of the reason why guys might not approach you out in public, and they'd much rather choose to do it in the DMs, where it's like, you know what, shorty doesn't look too bad on the pictures with the filters and everything, yet in public that might not necessarily look like the case. So as you're going on your body positivity or weight loss journey, that might be something to take into account. The fact that guys will look at a babe's belly might actually affect the entire thing. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, there's actually some smart shit that babes do nowadays, especially if you have like super thick thighs and shit. Like, when you're at the club or when you're seated somewhere, like, if they can flare out a little bit and make it look like your waist is smaller than your hips, then it can actually seem very attractive when you're seated. But that one's just an aesthetic trick that can actually work on quite a lot of guys. But all in all, the biggest issue that's actually affecting you is your belly and the fact that there's no booty or hips that are popping out. But all that said and done, I'm not saying that you're not a beautiful woman. You actually are. I think it's just that the proportions aren't really working in your favor. Although that said, gym and diet have been very good at reshaping people's bodies and making them look way more attractive than they ever thought they would look. Although, all that said and done, let me just point out one thing that I'm sure a lot of people actually fail to mention, and it's not even a problem with you. A good reason why you may not be getting approached by quite a lot of guys as opposed to your friends is also because guys are actually afraid of approaching you. Like, it's not necessarily just an issue with you by all means, it could be, a poker face that you have or anything, but a lot of times you find that guys are actually afraid of approaching babes. There's a lot fewer guys that are approaching women, so obviously they'll be a lot more picky. But if most guys were approaching babes and, babes were being approached by guys left, right, and center out here, then it would probably mean that you would at least get a couple of guys. But considering that a lot of people are afraid of approaching a babe out in public, but will be more comfortable sliding in the DMs, then you will find that in public, a lot of guys may not approach you. But All in all, I feel like that one's a much smaller reason as opposed to the rest. But let me just try and conclude all of this by telling you a couple of things. Now, first of all those babes that are busy telling you that you're beautiful the way you are, don't change for no man, blah blah blah. Honestly, those ones are some of the biggest bullshitters in the game. These will be babes that are genetically privileged and blessed with very nice bodies, such that dudes will probably approach them whether or not they go to a gym or just based off of something as simple as their skin color. The other babes that tell you that same exact shit are usually ugly babes that are unable to pull niggas themselves. So in some ways, probably they want you to stick in the same miserable pot that they're in. But whether or not that's true, at the end of the day, one thing stands clear. They're not the ones that are hitting on you, dudes are. And as such, when the market dictates that it wants a certain kind of thing, you can either respond to the market and increase your odds, or you can choose to run your entire race on your own and pretty much do your entire thing and hope, just hope, that the market is going to turn itself and adjust itself so that it can fit to what it is that you are. All in all, I know the one that has the best odds and I've at least tried to show it for you. But if you feel like you don't agree with it, if you feel like there's something that I might have missed, because I know there's quite a lot that I didn't talk about, then by all means, hit me up on the DMs. The DMs are always open. At Breaktime on Westside on Facebook and on IG, at Bagaka the D on Twitter. Tell me your thoughts and how you feel about this. Is this something that you agree with, or do you think that everything that I've said is a pile of garbage? But all in all, thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.